I don't like it.
Okay, so because it's 12, we'll start to record and kick off here, and I'll watch the waiting room here and just have people join, and I'll monitor the chat for you as well, Gab.
Sure.
So welcome. Thank you so much. I think we planned your presentation like a year ago, just like we did
Literally.
for 2025 as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really excited to have you here. I think well, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to efficiencies. And so this is like personally right up my alley, but I also know firsthand like how much of a game changer systems and processes and technology and really leaning into what might feel kind of scary for some people. But you know, working with you really opened my eyes to how much larger even you know things can be from like a scaling perspective. So
Mhm, mhm.
it was felt like a no-brainer to have you. So
Thank
with that,
you.
I'll kind of hand it over.
Sure.
And yeah, this will be recorded and sent out to everyone who's registered. So you can take it from
Awesome.
here. Okay?
Perfect. I will share my screen and make sure I'm on the right one. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. Obviously, systems is something that I can talk about for days and days and days, and in so many different levels. So I'm really excited to just kind of bring some light around systems to consider no matter where you are in your business. Like Meredith said, they can definitely be a scary thing to implement in your business, but it's so, so crucial, especially when you are wanting to scale and also just reclaim like time back in your day, whether that is to dedicate it back to the business or whether that is for your personal life. Like I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs are learning is like there has to be a way to balance putting time back into the business but also putting time into our personal lives and filling our own cup, because at the end of the day, without filling up your own cup, you won't be able to do just about anything that you want to do. So really excited to just kind of give you guys some light on this. um how many of you guys are like kind of dabbling into like automation systems? How many guys are you just kind of like really into it? Just by like the chat, just like let me know kind of where you're at in regards to systems and how you're feeling around it. Like it can be like green, yellow, red when it comes to where you're at. Green could be like I'm super into all the things. Orange, yeah, yellow can kind of be like in between, and red could be like super, super like not sure anything on systems and automations. And either which way, it's totally all good. Zapier and Dubsado. Yeah, Zapier is definitely one of the best of friends when it comes to all of the platforms. So definitely big fan of Zapier. There's actually some new ones coming out too that I'm like, not quite Zapier, but I can see them creeping up. So that's another thing with systems. You're always gonna have that like, what's that saying where it's like you're just so excited for everything that comes out. There's a saying for it, and I can't think of it right now. It's like your kid, you're it's like a kid, you're a kid in the candy store and you're like always wanting to see everything. But anyways, let's get into today's presentation. So one of the things that I want to highlight regarding systems is that I want you to think of today as like the blueprint of moving forward from feeling overwhelmed and feeling more in control of your business. Depending on where you guys are at, it's definitely something that I felt before when I was a solopreneur, was that like I have to wear all the hats and do absolutely everything, but I also need to grow my business so that I can support my livelihood. And it's such a big equation. And so I think that's why I do want to bring more light and awareness to systems, because I think people assume systems are just like tech and softwares and like that's it. But it's like there's a bigger reason for them being implemented into your business. So some of the main things that you're going to see through all the things that I talk about today is, how are we going to transform your workload? With that, how are we going to free up some time, and how are we going to accelerate without the burnout? I'm not going to lie to you, burnout is unavoidable when you are running your own business. At some point in time, you will continue to burn out, but there are ways that we can alleviate that even just a little bit, and we can control it a little bit more. When I compare where I was, years ago, like when I first started as a solopreneur, like I don't know, like 10 years ago to now, it's definitely a very different burnout that I experience. And each phase of where you go in your business, you're going to experience a different burnout as well. So those are some things that we're going to highlight today. um Before we dive into these 5 systems, though, I want to talk about understanding the dilemma and then understanding the power of systems, because I think knowing that foundation first will help you understand which systems to start implementing, what softwares make sense for you. Because I think too, systems can be overwhelming as to where do I even begin? Because like I said earlier, wearing all the hats of, being the service provider, being the owner, being the main person delivering the service, you don't have a lot of time to be changing the way that you do things when you also have a service to provide. So you're going to be selective of where you kind of start with your systems in your business. And there's various systems depending on the different departments that we're looking at. So first, understanding the dilemma. The common issue when it comes to not having systems in place is overwhelming workload, lack of time. And then the way that this impacts you is there's no room for strategy, innovation, and growth. And this is something that you're going to need as you scale your business. It's something that you have to dedicate and have time for. And so it's very important that we recognize this. And so that's the biggest thing there. It's kind of like, when you're taking all the groceries out of your car and you're like, I can do it all in one trip. But like inevitably, as you're walking to your door, things are going to fall, bags are going to rip, whatever that looks like. And so that's what systems is going to help you with, is not have you do that. So we're going to keep everything in check as we, grow and scale our business. So like I said, you're doing all the things. So we want to do everything that we can so that we're not being reactive and we're being proactive in scaling our business. So that's understanding the dilemma. Now, the power of systems, you can save honestly up to 5 hours per week. I know it seems like delegating 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, or automating 15 minutes there, whether it's delegating or automating, you might not think that 10 minutes here and there adds up, but it adds up so quickly. A lot of our clients who are very new to delegating are like, well, this only takes me a little bit of time. Like I could just keep it. Like I'm not really sure where I can get you to help me. But then once they, delegate that or automate that, they're like, wow, I didn't realize how much having, 30 minutes in my day can really add up. And that's the biggest thing to think about. Like 5 hours per week adds up real quick if you're saving 30 minutes a day, right? So it's really like thinking and not having that framework or mindset of like it's just 10 or 15 minutes. Like change that mindset of yours, because your time is so precious, like I said, especially if you're in that scaling phase. So I think it's very important to not say it's just this. You really, really need to be protective of your time, your energy, and your focus, and also your creativity, right? So there's that. And then when you give yourself back time, like I said, it will change between being for personal, business, whatever that might be, but it also just gives you mental real estate. This is something that I've said all the time. Mental real estate is such a beautiful thing to have. It just gives you space to like think, to be creative, to process. And I don't think we have a lot of that in our day anymore when we're so like go, 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 one thing to the next, right? So having a bit more time because of systems can really allow you to just like have space. And so that's kind of going on to the third point here, is like freeing up that mental energy and avoiding burnout. Like it's just one of those things that I can't emphasize more to people, that you need that. I didn't know what that was for the longest time. And I just thought, I'll hustle now and it'll all pay off later on. But you'll eventually hit a point where you can't hustle now and you're not going to see it later on. So you do need to make sure that you're giving yourself that space and time. And I want you to also think of systems as basically the framework of your house. You want to decorate, you want to add all these fixtures, you want to do all these things, but you can't do that without a strong foundation. So systems are one of the most important things in a business. And like everyone's so quick to say marketing, all that stuff, but it's like actually it's your systems at the end of the day, because without that, you just don't have that solid framework to automate, to delegate, whatever that might be. And furthermore, like as you get more and more into systems and business, you'll realize that by having these systems in place, it allows you to make strategic decisions in your business as well. When it comes to looking at data, when it comes to assessing what's working, what's not working. If you're referring back to your notebook or sticky notes, that's not really going to get you very far. And I don't know about you guys, but I cannot remember half the things that I did yesterday. And so me remembering what I did 2 years ago, it's not going to happen. So that's another thing, right? So really think of systems as contributing to the bigger picture in the long run. And I think that's the biggest mark that people kind of miss, is they think about like, oh, I don't need it right now. But it's like, okay, you might not need it right now. You might feel that way, but you will need it in order to get to where you want to go. And so I always say my biggest mistake that I made in business was not putting in systems when I was a solopreneur. I thought I didn't need systems until I was a team. But the problem with that was when I even hired my first team member, I had no idea how to tell them what I was doing. I was like, I just do it. I've been doing it for years. Well, that's not going to work when you're trying to delegate or when you're trying to create a system in automation, right? Like, so sticking more to the system versus delegation, even if you want to, start using a certain software, if you don't actually know what your process is, how are you supposed to translate that into a software? Whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're talking to customer service, if you can't explain to them the vision that you're trying to create with said system, it makes it really hard to leverage technology to help you at the end of the day. So that's just a little bit between, understanding the dilemma and the power of systems. Real quick here, we're not going to spend too much time about me because at the end of the day, I'm here to help you guys, but I do want to give you a little bit of context of where I'm even coming from. So like I've said a few times here, I've been a solopreneur for a really, really long time. We scaled into an agency in December of 2020. And in the last 3.5 years, we're now a team of 9. Beautiful team, my beautiful family. I'm so proud to call them all my family. A lot of them have been around since day one, which is super amazing. And we have put in over 20,000 active hours of system build out. So to say that I know a thing or two about systems is safe to say, because it's literally something that has just really, it's beautiful to see how much it's changed so many businesses from so many different levels of where they're all at. And it's something that, like I said, I want to bring more awareness to people at no matter what size of business you're at, because it can really just change the way that you show up as a CEO, the way that you show up for your business, the way you show up for your clients, and just all the things in between. So let's get into the 5 core systems that we're going to go a little bit more in depth today. And I want you to think of these systems as like a well-oiled machine where each part works together to keep your business running smoothly while you steer it forward. So I kind of went as overarching as possible. You can definitely go more micro in a lot of these things, depending on where you're at in your business. There's going to come a point in time where you're going to lean more into project management. You're going to lean more into customer relationship management. It's really going to change as your seasons ebb and flow in business. But I would say, like, if I were to start anywhere, these are the 5 systems that I would kind of like put on a priority list of what to tackle first. And so let's start with 1. So project management. Project management is definitely basically like your command center for your business. So instead of running around putting out fires, you can have a clear map of what needs to be done. I think this is the number one thing that I hear from a lot of people is they have so much on their to-do list. They feel like they have so many things that they, have to remember or like meet on deadlines, but it's like they don't even know when the deadlines are. They don't know what's a priority. Because that's the thing too. You can have like a checklist in your notebook, but like to know what is the actual priority of where your time and energy is needed can sometimes be overwhelming. And like I said, like, I don't know if it's entrepreneurship, but my memory is just not the same as it used to be. And so I need something to just tell me, like, here's your focus for today. And so I think this is a great thing for you right now as a solopreneur, if you are one. But then also, again, thinking about as you scale your team, because it's inevitable that if you're going to scale your business, you're going to scale your team in some sort of capacity. Not saying that you have to be a team of 9, but you might be a team of 2, a team of 3. You might be contractors on project based, right? So it's really important that you have something that will give you a bird's eye view of the business, whether it's just you right now or whether it's, a bigger team. So with that being said, project management can be a lot more than just managing your day-to-day tasks, your deadlines. It can be a place where you manage sales, inquiries, hiring, training, social media production, client rosters. Project management tools have become so much more than that. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to drive home too is so platforms like ClickUp, Asana, Notion, which I'm sure we've all heard of, have evolved to be much more than just a project management tool that manages day to day. I think that's what everyone assumes it to be, but you can actually manipulate these platforms to be so much more. And I think what's great about these platforms is that not only are these going to support you internally, but you can also, make it something that's going to help your client experience. So over time, we have been able to make ClickUp something part of our client experience of having a client dashboard, being able to manage where a project is at. There's so many different ways that so many clients have even manipulated ClickUp as well. So it really is something that you can customize to your business. And like I said, there's Asana and Notion. Each platform will have its like pros and cons, and that's something that's going to come down to personal preference. But I really just want to highlight that the project management tool can grow into so many different things than just a checklist. Because I think that's another resistance that some people have to a project management tool is like, isn't it just a checklist? But it's like, yes, some people might be using it as a checklist, but there's so much more opportunity in platforms if you are taught a little bit more on how to leverage it and how to use it and really maximize it for you and your business. So yeah, that's system number 1 that I would highly recommend implementing right off the bat. I started with Asana And then I accelerated into ClickUp, and now I'm ClickUp forever. But Asana alone was a great kind of first step. And I'll never, ever forget when I was a solopreneur and it was just me and my notebook. I lost my biggest client because I missed a deadline that was on my notebook. And that was a really hard pill to swallow because I was like, it's literally right there. But I overlooked it. I was tired, whatever my excuse was under the sun. It's like, had I just had a better system for myself rather than just all my things scattered on the kitchen table, I probably wouldn't have lost that client. So that was a big lesson for me. And that's, I think, why I really drive home the project management tool as one of the first things you guys do. So with everything that I go through today, I also want to highlight, why does this matter? So as a CEO, you need to keep the team aligned and ensure deadlines are met without micromanaging. So again, that applies to if you do have a team, but even to yourself, it's a great way to keep yourself aligned and ensure deadlines are met. A good project management system creates transparency and accountability, which leads to efficiency and a clear path to scaling. Like I've said, and I will say it one more time before we move on to the next topic, think about where you're going rather than where you are right now. And that will really save you a lot of headache and time, because something that I learned with not having systems when I was a solopreneur versus when I have a team now was it was a lot harder, it was a lot harder for me to teach and convert some of my team members on systems later on than if I just brought them into systems that we already had in place. And the bigger your team is, the more complicated it is going to be to introduce something new. There's going to be a lot more resistance, a lot more training, a lot more learning curves, a lot more frustration, a lot more opinions. And so if you already have something in place before you bring in even one team member, it's just what it is. You know what I mean? Like there's no way around it. Like this is just the way that our business works. But if you're figuring it out at the same time as bringing on, team members, it can be very, very frustrating. So I think it's very important to maximize on that. And the last thing I'll say too is, if you are going to be investing in people, in softwares, whatever that looks like, you want to make sure that you're, leveraging that investment as well. So you want to make sure that you are able to keep a pulse check on where your team is at, or you want to make sure that you're leveraging all the features in a software that you're using. And so very important that as we're investing in, like I said, either a team member or software, we leverage it to the, fullest capacity, capabilities. So system number two is marketing automation system. So this is definitely probably one of the easiest things that you can set up to automate when it comes to, scheduling things, when it comes to setting up pathways for clients when they sign on and automatically sending out a contract. I would say this is the most like beginner friendly system that you could set up on your own. And I mean, honestly, technology these days too, a lot of the softwares have great templates to start with, great customer service. There's obviously YouTube, there's TikTok, there's so many different platforms now that can help us in getting those extra set of hands when it comes to automating certain systems such as marketing. So really think of automating things as like an extra set of hands that just never get tired, is like what I like to say. So that is system number two. So let's dive into some things that you could automate in your ecosystem. So email sequences is probably one of the first ones that's like super easy to set up. You can use anything, like one of the most common ones that everyone starts with is MailChimp. There's ActiveCampaign, there's Flowdesk, there's, Kajabi can do that. Squarespace can do it. Like there's so many different platforms now, and it all depends on kind of what softwares you're using. But either way, I love that you can automate an email sequence to just keep in touch with your, sales pipeline and your leads and your inquiries, but also nurture the audience that you already have. Again, this is going to come in place depending on where you're at in business, but I think email sequences, even something as simple as, when you order something online and you get that thank you message, and then sometimes if you leave something in your cart, automatically you get a reminder, like little things like that are something that can really save you time and also save you a sale, or also enhance someone's experience in working with you. I think one thing that is super important to emphasize on in the early stages of business is really thinking about your client relationships, and that is around your client experience. And so by automating some of those things to make it as seamless as possible and as customized as possible too, I think is a really good thing to do via email sequences. Lead nurturing, that's another thing, kind of like what I was talking about. Like if you leave something in your cart, those emails that come up after to say, hey, did you forget this? Hey, did you have any questions? So, an example that we've talked about with our clients in the lead nurturing sequence is like giving more information about a service that maybe they were interested in, or a product they were interested in, because maybe there's some more questions around that. So those are two kind of like email like automations that you could set up. And then there's social media management. Obviously, now with social media, that is a big part of our day, because I always joke that entrepreneurs kind of sign up to be an influencer in a way now, or a content creator, whatever you want to label it. It's not something that we thought we were going to be doing, but if you're going to be in the forefront of your business, that's something that you've now signed up for. And obviously, delegating is something that is a future plan. And so, for a little bit, you not only are you the CEO, the service provider, all the things under the sun, but you're also now a content creator. So when it comes to your social media content, being able to schedule that out automatically is going to save, 15 minutes at least in a day. And like I said earlier, 15 minutes is still 15 minutes. So using platforms like Later, even the organically in Instagram or TikTok desktop, all those things, you can at least schedule, a week in advance of content, and that does save you some time. And I'm a big fan of, calendar blocking. So, every Friday is my content day. That's when I'll film. That's when I'll edit. That's when I'll schedule things accordingly. And so I do recommend that you guys kind of block your calendar a little bit in order to set up some of these automations, because while it is automated, there is still that manual work that you have to do up front just to kind of set things up. So kind of having that time would be really, really helpful for yourself. So those are some three things that you could those are some three things you can start with automatically setting up, so that they can go out without any manual work. So again, why does this matter? Consistent communication and follow-up are crucial to converting leads and maintaining customer relationships, as I spoke about earlier. Automating these processes allows you to scale your marketing efforts without increasing your workload. At the end of the day, that's something that we're always going to be looking at, is like, how do we work smarter, not harder? And by automating what we can, is going to help us significantly. Like, while I speak about automation a lot here, I also have some things that I'm just never going to automate. For example, my client proposals, I always like to send a Loom video to each client. So that's never going to be automated. That'll forever be something that takes up 30 minutes of my time to send a proposal. But that's important to me because that builds on customer relationships. So while I am encouraging a lot of automation, also be stern on the certain things that you want to keep as a manual thing. And that's okay. Not everything needs to be automated, because on the contrary to it, the more automations you have, the more things can be broken. So it's something to be mindful of before you turn all the automations on, is that the more automation, the more there is to manage, the more there is chances of things breaking. So really taking your time and really thinking strategically on what to automate and when is very, very important as well. All right, system number 3, our CRM is like having a personal assistant who keeps track of all of your client interactions, due dates, and payments. So there's a few different ways that you can use CRM systems. Everyone is very different depending on their industry, but some things that you can automate there. So sorry, I have the wrong header up here, I realized. But some of these things that can do is streamline client relationships. So, things like Dubsado, Honeybook, automatically, for those who don't know much about Dubsado, Honeybook, it's a really, really nice process where when someone inquires, you can send a contract, a proposal, they can pay, they can schedule, a sequence of emails can go out right away. You can document all their invoicing there. You can even schedule like calls and stuff like that thereafter. I personally don't use Honeybook or Dubsado, but I have seen a lot of clients use it very successfully. And I think it's a really nice way, again, of enhancing that client experience, but also keeping all the things in one place. Because I think that's something else that will come up for you guys as you go through your systems, is how do I not use too many and keep as many as possible under one roof? And so again, that's something that's going to come over time, of being able to condense. But I think those are important questions to ask as you're considering what systems to implement, is, what is going to cover all of the things, what is going to integrate well. So things to think about is like, what's important for you and your business and your processes. So I think even before you look at some of the softwares, it's like, okay, what are my actual step-by-step processes in what I do? And where am I finding that I'm spending most of my time, or where am I finding a little bit of resistance? And once you kind of have that checklist of, okay, these are things that are like eating up my time that I don't necessarily think my brain and my body needs to do, that can be something you research into softwares of being like, which one can I go with, right? So that's some other things to think about as well. But either way, the CRM is great, as it is a nice place to kind of like house everything as it pertains to a client in one area. Why does this matter? Your relationships with clients are literally everything. That is one of my biggest, core value in our business, is that without our clients, we're not a business. So like really maintaining relationships with our clients and taking care of our clients is very important. And I think too, it's also your clients beyond their time in working with you. I think a lot of people kind of stop that relationship once the, contract is done per se. But it's very important that you continue to maintain that, and because you never know who's in your network or when you guys are going to cross paths again. And something nowadays too is it takes a lot, like, people a lot longer to invest in you. And so while they might be a no right now, it's very important to continue to maintain some sort of relationship through emails or social media or whatever that might be. So I think that's very, very important. And also too, not everyone is going to feel any sort of way if, say you forget to invoice someone and then they're 3 months behind. Well, technically that was on you, not on them. Like, some clients can get upset about that because the way that they've budgeted, they were ready to pay you every month, but now you're coming to them being like, hey, you're out 3 months, right? So being on top of client payment dates, contract renewals, all that stuff is very, very important, because you just never know how it's going to affect the client on the other end. So very important that, using a CRM, is something that will allow that things to not slip through the cracks, and just making sure that we are, covering all of our bases. So fourth system here is finance system. So this is something that I never really like implemented myself, and my accountant actually was like, this is what we do. But in thinking about it, it definitely is something that I think is important that not a lot of people think of right off the bat. They just think of, okay, how am I going to send an invoice? But I think it's also important to think of, okay, how am I not only going to send an invoice, but how am I going to bookkeep all of my receipts for tax time? How am I going to track, the taxes that I've been, I don't even know the terminology. I hate accounting. I hate tax season. Like, my accountant literally just tells me what I got to do and I just do it. But like, understanding, I guess, like what you'll owe in taxes, or, especially if you work with people from different provinces, depending on how you have your setup, like you're paying into different tax, not bracket, but tax percentages or whatever. I learned that this year in working with more Ontario people. I'm in Alberta and the taxes are very different in Ontario. So like, that was a lot higher than I expected. And I didn't even think about that. Also your expenses, I think it's very important to track too. I remember my first year of being a solopreneur. I didn't like invest enough, essentially. Like, I didn't have enough expenses. And so I got dinged for that. And I'm like, that makes no sense. You're going to penalize me for not spending enough. But again, I don't remember the explanation as to why that works, but I did get dinged for it. And so now I'm a bit more cautious of that. But on the flip side too, if you're wanting to invest in a business coach, if you're wanting to, delegate to someone, if you're wanting to outsource getting your systems built out, if you're wanting to do personal development, understanding where your profit margins are, understanding, okay, where can I allocate, budget, is very important to be able to see in a bigger picture. And you can do that through certain systems regarding finance. So I like that too, that not only is it needed just in general for tax purposes, but it's also needed so that you can make more strategic decisions. Because I think when you don't have an overall picture of where your finances are, you kind of make decisions based on what you think your bank account is like, or what you think you can afford. And that's where you can get into some hot water for sure when it comes to, end of the year, or tax time. And also too, I think that depending on how you have your business set up, I remember not putting aside money for tax season and then being hit big with like a 5-digit number. It's like, holy, like, I did not prepare for this. So I think being able to have something automatically do this for you, and then being able to go in there for that data is very important. And automating it, I think, is so important, because I don't know what you, but like, going through my receipts, plugging into an Excel sheet, like, I'm not down for that. Where, a lot of softwares nowadays make it really easy that you can scan a receipt, you can email in a receipt, whatever that might be. And so I think that's really, really helpful in itself. And then it all kind of connects with your invoicing too. So very, very important that you guys look into a finance system. Same thing like what I talked about earlier, just cash flow management is very important, and it is essentially the backbone of your business. So being able to automate this where you can is going to be very, very important. Last system here, I also realized I'm going a little fast, but I was more so worried that I wouldn't have enough time. So I know we have some Q&A at the end, so that'll be good too. But final system is AI tools. So obviously AI, I feel like was a big boom this year. I don't know if it was this year or last year, but I feel like it was this year, in my opinion. And I think AI has a bad rap in a sense. I think that's only if you use it incorrectly or disingenuinely or without integrity, But I do feel like there is a way to leverage AI to expedite certain things, to give ideas that you wouldn't have thought about, to ignite an idea that maybe you're kind of stuck on. And so I think that's a really important way to look at AI and leverage AI. I feel like a lot of people myself included, I definitely did diss AI a little bit, being like, you can't replace, such and such with AI. And while that's still not true, you can expedite the process and you can kind of have a conversation with AI a little bit too, which is kind of cool. So really think of it as like an assistant that's available 24/7, that can really just kind of expedite like researching and stuff like that for you as well. So some of the best ways that I like to use AI is brainstorming and content creation, as well as, things like note taking. That has saved my meetings so much by having an AI in there, note taking for me, summarizing things for me. Like that is probably my favorite part of AI just taking off this year, was how having a note taker in meetings helped me get, market research easier, helped me get testimonials easier, helped me not have to take notes while I'm trying to actively listen to clients or team members. And so I think that is a prime example of leveraging AI that can help you in so many different pockets of your business. I refer to my meeting notes so many times when I'm thinking of content ideas, when I'm thinking of, maybe client things that have come up, like issues that I do want to resolve or things that I want to improve on, or, I don't even know what else there is, but like so many other things. There's just so much that you can do with it. And I think that's something that not a lot of people think of when they think of like AI note taking things, is that yes, it can transcribe for you. Yes, it can summarize for you, but it's also such a rich piece of content that you can use for newsletters or Instagram or TikTok, whatever. And that's literally from people that you've talked about or talked to or have worked with. There's no better way to get market research than those people versus just like surfing the internet, so I think that's a very strong thing there. Brainstorming, honestly, I have used AI to break down the difference between certain softwares that I've been looking at. I've used it to help me think of like TikTok series that I want to do. I've used it for recipes. I've used it literally for so many different things. And even like emails, that's a big one. Like when I want to send an email that I'm not quite sure how to word it, like I love it that it gives me a base. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to emphasize, is that it's a base for me to go off of thereafter. It's definitely not something that I'll copy and paste. It's something that'll just give me some inspiration to go off of, and then further I can customize it to work for my voice, work for my thoughts, work for whatever aligns more with me. So don't be discouraged in using that because there's this, bad rap around it. I think there's only the bad rap around it if you're, like I said, doing it without integrity. So definitely leverage it for that. And sometimes it's just nice because it pulls from so many different places in the internet versus just asking one or two people that in your network. So I do think it's great. And I think if you use the right prompts, you can really get some cool research from that. And like I said, that can really just get your mind going on creative flow and everything like that. So really really leveraging AI is important. And I think that's why you're seeing it more and more in softwares too. Just AI options to summarize, to give you ideas, to clean things up, whatever that might be. Because even like Canva, for example, like if you want to find a photo, like in my mind, Googling for a photo is literally the same amount of time as me asking Canva to generate it. So sometimes I'm like, it doesn't really save me time, but it is cool to be like, hey, generate a photo of a dog and a bird for me, and like seeing all the different ones that they pull up. Like, like it is interesting and it is cool. But yeah, that's why you're going to see it a lot for sure. And I mean, you have to think AI is also in like photo editing softwares, like, Photoshop, for example. The fact that you can like completely remove something or completely duplicate something just through technology, like it's super, super cool. So yeah, lots of things that you can leverage in AI. Like I've said before, you guys are responsible for so many different things in your business, from being the visionary, being the execution of your business. AI is just a way to make things just a little bit easier for you. So use it, especially since a lot of it is free. Just use it. So kind of going into, tying everything together, and just some things that are maybe coming to mind is, how do you know how to choose right systems? How do you know where to start? And like I kind of mentioned earlier, evaluating what do you need based on what you're currently doing and what you feel is roadblocks for you in order to get to that next step, or in order for you to actually progress in whatever you're trying to improve on personally. And so it's kind of like finding the right tool in the toolbox. And so you really want to think about like, what is going to get me there faster and more efficiently. And like I said, I think the best way to do that is to really list out all the things that you do and like kind of highlight, what is needed of me to manually do and versus what's not. And then you can kind of figure out what system is going to work from you there. Um, And like I just said with AI, go ahead and plug that into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm debating between ClickUp and Asana. Here's some things that are important to me. Here's a little bit about what I do. What do you think is best for me? And show me the pros and cons. Literally, ChatGPT will break that down for you and expedite you having to go to Asana's website, ClickUp's website, reading everything, watching YouTube videos. And I really like that. That's how you can kind of like help figure out where to start. And I think the biggest thing to emphasize too, you might start with one and then be like, this isn't for me. And then you're going to go to another one. And that's totally fine too. Like I said, I started with Asana and then I moved up to ClickUp because of where we were going and what I wanted. And then I think another thing to think about is, again, where are you going in the next year? Where are you going in the next 2 years? Because also, while I do say you can move over, it's not easy to move over depending on where you're at. It's a lot of work. And like I said earlier, it can be a lot, especially if you have a big team or anything like that. So really think future scope and just think like, okay, the learning curve today is going to be worth it for my future, because then I won't have to tear everything down and build it back up. And then I think another thing is just test to see what's working, what's not working, see how much time you're actually saving with some of this stuff, and really start small and just scale as you continue to see more results. But that's another thing too, is like, you're not going to know if a software works for you, no matter how much research you do, until you try it. Like, do a trial, plug in a template or something and give that a try and see how it goes. You can also, ask experts on like some insight if you wanted to kind of expedite like being able to see into what some people have done themselves. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that it integrates with whatever you currently have. So that's something that I always say too. Like for example, when deciding what email marketing software to go with, well, think about the other systems that you have in place. Can Zapier have them speak to each other? Can they, natively integrate with one another? And you can also, again, chat GBT or Zapier and be like, what softwares does such and such integrate with? Because, for example, I know, accountants, they have a very specific set of softwares that they have to use. And so when they want to expand their systems, they need to know if it's going to work with the ones that there's no wiggle room on doing something else. They have to use those systems. So very important that you look into that as well. So yeah, that's kind of some guidelines around choosing the right systems. Next, last but not least, is implementing, the implementation strategy. So like I said, start with one system first and then integrate slowly and then measure the success of it. You're always going to want to audit, reassess what's working, what's not working. And you do that already in your business with your offers, with your client experience, with your marketing. So there's no difference in your systems as well. You're going to want to reassess all the time. And like I said, a great way to do that is to kind of assess how much time was saved or how much more smoothly something took place or whatever that might look like. So that'll really give you a picture on like what's working and what's not, and if there's any refinement. And I will say, systems are never, ever done. I think that's a big misconception, that people think they get it built out, whether it's themselves or, outsourcing it. And they're like, okay, I'm done. I never have to touch it again. But it's like, actually, like, we audit our systems probably every quarter, but then also too, sometimes when an issue comes up, we're assessing it right then and there and we're fixing it right then and there. So don't ever think that your systems are done, because as you grow, as you scale, as you change the way that you want to do things, your systems are going to have to change and support that too. So it's an ongoing project, 100%, but it's something it's great that it can grow with you. And I think that's a very important thing in itself. These are just some quick stats on, how systems have definitely improved and changed businesses. And I think it's a very important thing to kind of look at when it comes to increasing productivity, profitability, employee retention, all that good stuff. So I think and customer retention too. I think it's very important to just see the importance of having systems in place. And like I said, they don't need to be anything too fancy. They can literally be bare bones to start, to alleviate just some time and some mental capacity that you have. And that will conclude our presentation for today. If you guys want a little bit of a cheat sheet on systems, our favorite ones, how to go about things, you can send me a DM, My Wolf Design, and I will know that you guys are coming from this training, and I'm happy to give that to you. That QR code just takes you to the Instagram profile. But like I said, at the end of the day, pick one system from today's training, start implementing it, and even small change can serve you an hour, and that can make a big difference just in your day, in your week, and in your life and in your business. So really make sure you think of the bigger picture. So with that being said, that is everything for today. Thank you so much for listening to me speed talk, basically.
Thank you. That was great.
Good.
I will open it up to Q&A.
Mhm.
I personally have some questions,
Yeah.
but I'll let everyone else go first because I've had lots of time with you before.
But I love it. I love that we can just talk all the time, That's the
Yeah.
best.
Does anyone have any questions? You're free to just put yourself, you can remove mute or put it in the chat, whatever you want. Okay, it doesn't look like anything yet, but I'll let everything kind of sink in. One
Mhm.
question, so I tend to kind of like touch on these questions when creating websites for people, because as
Yeah.
soon as we start to say like, hey, how do you want leads to contact you? And it's like, oh, I'd love them to book a call. And it just opens up this massive can of worms, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
um, and so there seems to be this belief that like, hey, I don't need any of that. I'm not ready for any of that.
Yeah.
What would you say would be some signs that you are in fact ready for some kind of technology?
Mhm.
In my personal opinion, it comes like you've signed up to own a business. It
Yeah.
sort of
I
defaults,
was literally gonna
but I
say,
don't
I
think
think
that's
it's just
everyone's
something that
thinking.
is needed. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't think there's a sign that you're ready. I think it's something that you have to dive in. Like we
Right.
are in 2024, like
Yeah.
technology is something that we need to get on board with. And I understand not everyone nerds out on tech like you and I do. But like I said, I feel like softwares have made it digestible for even those who aren't big fans of tech to understand and to use it. And there's so many resources out there to support you. And like I said, the customer service is great too. Like to give
Mhm.
you perspective, like my mom is on the team. She's 51 and she's like, what is ClickUp? Like, what is this? She was so, even like Loom video, she
Yeah.
was so resistant to it. And she's like, absolutely not. And
Mhm.
now she loves her Loom videos. She
Yeah.
loves her ClickUp. And it just came with a learning curve and just not having so much resistance to it because you just realize that this is just where we're at today in
Right.
business.
Right.
So I don't really think there's a sign. I think you just need to go into it, give yourself that space and time to learn,
Mhm.
and just know that it does get easier, just like with anything, like working out, when it comes to learning something new, like just with anything, like it will get better. Yes, it's scary, absolutely, but like what sign are you waiting for, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I guess some people are like, well, people email me or people call me, and like that's probably the hardest clients to convert into something like this, like a form or anything like that,
Mhm.
right? But I think at the end of the day, I think it's about explaining the why behind things that people will be more open to what you're suggesting, because I can see from your perspective, especially when you're doing website design, how it's like I can't really set it up all the way if you don't have
Right.
some of these things set up or you're not willing to. And so I think it's really just about explaining the why and, even just sharing your own personal experience. But
Mhm.
yeah, I will say I'm with you that I don't think there is a sign. I think it's
Yeah.
just part of what we've signed up for today.
Right. Yeah. It's such an ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
Like lead generation, email marketing, it touches the website, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having these conversations, yeah, is in my daily with individuals. And they're like, oh, no, no, I don't need anything fancy.
Yeah. And that's
But
a
like,
that's probably like a trigger for you, I'm sure too, is
oh,
like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
need anything fancy. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not that it's fancy, it's that it's needed and just
Right.
a base requirement. And
Right.
so I think that's also something that we've learned too in, what we do, is that like having these conversations with clients before they even start a project to say, hey, do you understand that like this is going to be a learning curve, not just for your website, but like your business as a whole, right? And I think
Right.
that until a third party comes in to bring that to light, they're not aware of it because they're not in it all the time. They're focused on all the other things that we've talked about today of being that CEO and the entrepreneur. So I think that hopefully in time, more and more people are a bit more open and receptive to hearing opinions and the why behind it, and like
Mhm.
being open to learning. And I do see, even in my own network of people, where, a year ago they're like, oh, that's too much for me. And then, they come back now and they're like, I realize now why you were saying, okay, maybe I
Yeah.
should have done that back then. And they're like, okay, now I'm here. Right. So
Yeah.
I think as long as you are educating, or anybody here, as long as you guys are educating people on the why behind why you recommend things and how it's going to work and how it can benefit them, like I said, in the future as well, I do feel like there's a little bit more willingness in that. Because at the end of the day too, like I understand that that could be frustrating for you as a service provider. It's like I can't fully give you the service that I want to give you if we don't have all these puzzle pieces. And so I
Right.
think for all service providers, having some sort of a checklist on that is a very, very important thing before going into any, especially big project like a website.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes for clients to hear that, and sometimes they'll want to go somewhere else that won't challenge them, I guess, in a
Yeah.
sense. But I think it's up to us as service providers to really be that good cop, bad cop a little bit of being like, this is the reality of some things that I have seen through my own experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like the poster child for everything doing it wrong. As you know, for those who don't know, Gabs and her team built out our ClickUp just under a year ago, I guess. And I was
Yeah.
the person that I was like, it's just all in my head. I had not written out a thing. And with a team of 10 already,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. You
know,
have a team of 10, you have a big
yeah,
team.
yeah. It was I wouldn't say a nightmare, but it was like a wake up call that, you know, because you, as a business owner, you kind of go with the flow a little bit. You're like, okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here, I'm here, I'm here. And you don't sort of stop and say, okay, I need to reevaluate. Like this is, you know, this level now or that level
Yeah.
now. You just kind of go,
Well,
right?
and kind of like what I was talking about earlier, right? Like, had I just implemented certain systems on my own and thought about, okay, like if I added one more person or two more people, what does this look
Right.
like? It would have been a little bit easier where, for you, like having 10 people be like, so what are we doing? That's a lot to handle. Like, I
Right.
empathize a lot for you to be like, damn, like that's a lot of people that are going to share how they feel about it or
Yeah.
how they're not trusting it or how whatever, right? And like,
Right.
that's a really big challenge. But I do think, kind of like what I said earlier, it's very important that we dedicate time, whether that's quarterly, biannually, or whatever you want to do that feels right for you, to
Yeah.
just sit and audit, but also ask people, how are you feeling about this process? Because if there's anything I've learned with my team, from my side, everything looks great. But
Right.
then from their side, actually, it's not working great. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, well, I wouldn't know this if you don't say something. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes two team members are a bit resistant to share that because they're like, well, I just got to get it done. And I think it's very important that in a team culture you encourage that, to say, hey, like, always open to ideas, always open to feedback, so we can
Right.
better everyone's experience, everyone's efficiency, and everyone's collaboration. And so I think that by you as a leader to intentionally give that time and space for everybody will allow for more opportunity to refine things
Yeah.
as they're needed and
Yeah.
as specific as they need to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Systems are a challenge 100%, and especially because everyone's a different kind of learner, a different kind of communicator. Like, it makes it very complex because for you, you're like, oh, that's easy. For someone else, it's like, no. And so sometimes, depending on the team member and their role, you kind of need to do what maybe you wouldn't do personally, but it works better for them, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's where things like can click up with the different views and everything like that is very nice, because then at least that way, that's another way to accommodate that. But yeah, systems love, but they're a lot.
Yeah. 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 I think what served me was the fact that like one of our values is like evolution and
Yeah.
leaning into it. And we
Mhm.
had Dubsado. Like it wasn't like I didn't have any systems. So
Yeah.
it wasn't, you know, night and day
Mhm.
difference. It was sort
Mhm.
of rolling things in. But because we had constantly communicated about like, hey, we're in this industry to help businesses. And again, I believe it's an ecosystem. You can't talk about a website without systems, right?
Yeah, we're like all in the same
It's
world.
all the
Yeah.
same, right? And
Mhm.
so yeah, I would say like I am proud that, you know, everyone did come like with a lot of feedback and
Yeah.
to help and all of that, but I equate it to the fact that that was one of our values. So it wasn't a big
Yeah.
shocker, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I think
yeah.
it's one of those things that you're like ready for it, but then you're also like, wow, we're here.
Yeah.
This is a lot to take in. It's like I'm ready for it, but like once you're there in the reality, you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, never mind. Why did I do this? But in the end, like it all works out in
Oh,
time.
totally. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I definitely know what you mean, where it's like, okay, this is we're here now.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Joanne has a question in the chat. Do you want me to read it to you or can you see it okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Read it? Okay.
Yeah.
It says, I'm looking to sell my home staging business in probably the next 5 years. Woo, that's exciting.
That's so
I have,
exciting.
yeah, I have everything in my head and use Gmail as my file. My son, my heart is racing. Is yours? Okay, my son says I should get a CRM, and I'm also looking at software to keep track of my inventory. Everything costs, plus I have to learn it all, which is pretty overwhelming for me. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
overwhelming for anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot to take in, especially when you say it's in my head in a Gmail as my file. I'm like, where do we even begin with that? But I think Joanne, you're a perfect example of like, yeah, where do you start when
Right.
you've gotten, first of all, it's amazing that you've gotten as far and as successful as you have with just what you've been using. That's amazing. And I love that for you. But to your point, because you're thinking of selling your business, and that's another thing to think of, right? Like if you are wanting to sell your business or anything like that, or incorporate another partner in or whatever it might look like, you need to be able to showcase like the ins and outs of your business, right? So I think for you, like I said, number one is to make sure you have the time and the space to do so. So for me, what I did at the time was I backed off a little bit on like client projects, and then also calendar blocking where I did client work versus I did, my own learning on softwares and stuff like that. So if you could do that in your schedule, I think that would really help so that you're not switching hats on and off all day long. Cause I think that's also something that's like really challenging to do. I think too, you're not gonna like turn everything off before like to move over to another thing. You're gonna kind of have two things going at once, just so that you can keep the business going, and then also kind of like start moving things over into whatever you want to try. Um, so kind of going into the first thing of, I'm also looking for software to keep track of your inventory as well as a CRM. The nice thing is I feel like there's a lot of softwares out there now that you can use it as a form of CRM, and you could track the inventory. I mean, even something like, I don't know if you where you process sales and stuff, but if I were to think of say Shopify, just to keep it simple, like I know that's more of an e-commerce platform, but like say Shopify, for example, you can accept payment through there, and you can also track inventory there. So that way it'd be like one learning curve for you. So again, plugging it into Google Chat GPT to say literally what you've just said, they could probably recommend like what would be the best inventory tracking software for you. I can't remember the one that I've used for a warehouse company that we set up a system for, but that was another good one that I had worked on. I'll see if I can remember it, and then I'll maybe have to pass it along to Meredith to pass along to you. But it was a really good one. It's Stage Process. Okay, that's a one that you can use, but it's expensive. That's another thing, is that especially with your industry being so different, sometimes there are softwares that are like so like made perfectly for you that yes, it is expensive, but it might be worth it, because I have seen it on the flip side. Like, for example, we worked with an Airbnb management company. They wanted to use ClickUp, but because they were so resistant to the one that was actually made for Airbnb management because of the expense. In the end, they actually ended up going with that software because they're like, it literally has everything I need, instead of the headache that I have of trying to DIY a software that wasn't really meant for the things that I needed. So it's something to think about for sure. But like I said, in the meantime, you could use probably something like Shopify, or I really wish I could think of the one that I'm thinking of, to track the inventory and the CRM that you need to. And then you just kind of build off of that as well. Um, and then I think another thing too is just like your to-do list. Like I said, you could start with something like Asana, like Notion, or something like that, just to kind of like track all that as well. Even like as you're looking into softwares that you want to change into, putting that on your to-do list, I think is a really helpful thing to get used to that habit of putting things into a project management tool. So I think while you're exploring this, I think that's a great way to just kind of put your reps in for that. And then, yeah, that's kind of like my biggest way that I would go about it is, like, I just to kind of summarize, like, give yourself time and space to do the research and to learn on it. And then days that you're like doing client work, so that you're not like going between being a student versus being a service provider. So you can kind of like be really focused in on that if time allows for that. And then really just, yeah, weigh out the pros and cons of not doing Stage Force versus using something else. Um, I know I've definitely paid a pretty penny in softwares where I didn't use all the features right away, but I love that I've been in there for so long that like it's not too new to me now, that as I'm now using all the features, it's like, now I'm leveraging the cost of it. I don't know how expensive it is, but that is something that I would think about, just given the example I gave with that management company, is they invested in us to set up their ClickUp, and their team went through the training, and then in the end they ended up having to go do another setup. So just kind of see the pros and cons there. Meredith, the challenges with square peg round hole are costly. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Great way to put it. And you know, you and I have definitely learned that through our own experiences too. And as much as like you want it to happen, sometimes it just can't. Especially when again, when you write down your non-negotiables of what you want to happen and not happen, I think that's very important too. To make it a non-negotiable if a software is for you or not. So hopefully that helps. But it's gonna be a fun learning curve for you for sure.
Thanks, Gabs.
Yeah,
Everyone's just saying thank you, thank you.
of course, of course.
Questions? Anyone else? You can just put yourself, take off mute. We're almost to the 1 hour mark too, so you actually planned that perfectly.
I know. I thought it for a second that I was a little too fast, but no,
No,
that
you're
worked.
good. You're good.
And I should know better too. With the Q&A, I like to talk a lot
Yeah.
more. So
Yeah,
having at least 20 minutes, I think is better than 10,
yeah,
15, to be honest with
totally,
you.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be including all your information as well,
Amazing.
so that
Sounds good.
people can reach out. But do you offer like a free consult or something like that if people wanted to chat with you
Yeah,
about?
yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay,
Having
okay,
our,
cool.
I want to find a different word than discovery call,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
if you were to reach out and we schedule a call for free, like absolutely,
yeah.
I'd love to just give some
Okay.
insights. I think that's
Yeah.
important too before you know, dive into like, hey, I want to set up my systems. It's like just give me some insight on where we would kind of go, what it would look like before you even talk about packages and stuff like that. So absolutely, like even for those watching the replay, if you guys have follow-up questions from anything from this presentation, feel free to just send a DM to our Instagram, and I'm more than happy to just kind of like go back and forth that way. I really just want to help it and just give insight on, like I said, systems that are definitely going to be a game changer for so many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
It is a game changer. I can attest to that for sure.
Yeah,
So
thank
yeah.
you. Well,
Okay.
thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for
I
being with
had lots
us.
of fun, and
Good.
I hope to see some of you guys around on Instagram.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Gabs.
Bye.